Good morning and welcome to week one. Ahead of this week, you would have read the Ford et al. Paper, The Idea of Business Networks, and the chapters recommended within the core reading, and watch the introduction video that has been uploaded just to set in place the learning and expectations that will take place over the coming weeks. So, as you know, the course aims are to define the characteristics of business-to-business markets, being able to differentiate between business-to-business and business-to-consumer markets, understand the importance of relationships within the market, and also to appraise the role of the business-to-business marketing manager in the broader context of the overall business strategy. Okay, so what we're going to do is over the coming weeks and months, we're going to look at all of these things over the content that's being delivered. Okay, so we've gone through the course objectives and aims. Each lecture itself will have its own specific set of objectives. So after this lecture, you'll be able to understand the types and structures of business-to-business markets, and we'll be able to start exploring the differences between business to consumer and business to business markets. A lot of what you've done so far is within the business to consumer arena. So this is where we're really going to look at the differences and similarities between the two. Like I said in the introduction, marketing is all about process. Okay, we can all get caught up on the sexy tactics at the end because that's what everyone sees. But actually, marketing is process, process, process. And if you follow the process, the output would always be right. But if there's no process, if you're just winging it, that's when the results are really, really hard to quantify. Much like business to consumer, it is easy jump straight to the tactics. I went through this in the introduction video, so I'm not going to labor it here. But in business to business, the tactics can be anything such as personal selling, trade shows, advertising. It can be digital and such. With that, you've got to think, what comes before the tactics? Okay, if tactics without strategy is meaningless. If there's no strategy to inform the tactics, the effort spent in tactics is wasted. Okay, so this is what are we going to do in strategy? Tactics are how are we going to get there? But before the strategy, there is another step, and that is diagnosis. What's going on? Okay, this is where we ask ourselves what's going on within the market, how does it operate, where does the organization stand within it, what are the competitors doing, and what other ways do the consumers have to solve the problem that we're trying to solve. And like I mentioned in the introduction, diagnosis, strategy, tactics, these are all processes, and they're multiplicities. So each multiplies the effectiveness of the next, and without one effort in one, the rest is entirely wasted. So like I said, this is Mark Ritzen's work. There is the Padlet that you can look at, and I've got in there the links to Mark Ritzen and others that can give you a bit of extra background into all of this. So do have a look at the Padlet for that extra content. Right, so as I mentioned in the introduction, the module will be divided into those three stages. We are in the first stage, and that is of diagnosis. Okay, so today we're doing Introduction to Business Marketing. We're going to look at two terms and definitions of business-to-business marketing. The first is Turnbull in the Ellis textbook that you've got, and that is that the term business-to-business marketing is used to describe the marketing activities of any type of organization which has an exchange relationship with other organizations or businesses. Okay, I'll give you a moment just to read it yourself. Now, there's a slight difference between the Turnbull definition and the Baines et al. Definition. Baines et al. Feel that business-to-business marketing is concerned with the marketing of a huge range of products and services that are bought and sold between organizations. Okay? Subtle. So if you remember, the Turnbull definition looked at the marketing activities of any kind of organization which has an exchange relationship with other organizations or businesses. Whereas this is the marketing of products and services. So slight difference, and it's worth noting here that we aren't talking about just businesses, whereas Turnbull looked at businesses and organizations. This is just organizations. And why I like this is because it doesn't just cover the profit sector. It doesn't just cover businesses dealing with businesses. It can also deal with businesses dealing with NGOs, government departments, universities. It can be within the third sector, so charities. So it has a wider scope. So you're not just looking at that profit sector, not looking at businesses and businesses. It can be businesses and charities, charities and charities. It's a wider scope, but this is very much organizations dealing with organizations. So the term has evolved over time, and as any discipline evolves over time, as more and more knowledge comes into it, as more and more research is done, so terms change. So it started in the 60s with industrial marketing. So this is looking at very much industry, looking at production, looking at factories, looking at the supply chain of raw materials through to finished goods and focusing just on that. In the 80s, it started developing into business-to-business marketing. As it matured, in the 2000s, it started to recognize that inclusion of the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, the government, the third sector and such, and which is why it's broadened that scope to organizational marketing. Okay. In this course, we will use the term both B2B as well as organizational marketing. So we will use both terms interchangeably, but please be aware that we are talking about organizational marketing as a whole. All right, so it's not just businesses. So marketing has evolved over time. As it started off in the 50s with that industrial marketing, that so did the theory that went alongside it. This is when we started looking at the product life cycle, the phases that products go through, from early adopters through to mass to decline to brand imaging. This is when we start looking at brand image, how you build a brand, what is a brand. It started to build on those early concepts of value beyond just what the organization produced, actually the brand itself and the attributes it has. Started looking at the marketing audits. This is where companies started to have to know more about themselves, the environment that they were within, the wider context of the market and as such. And you'll start to see this is when process started coming to marketing. So this is before the 50s. It was very much have a product, need to sell it. We can sell anything if we sell it hard enough. We just create that demand and sell it. No more, no less. The exchange is very much, the value is in the exchange. Or actually, 1950s, they wanted to know a bit more. This is where the strategy and that analysis, the diagnosis stages came in. Okay, so we started moving away just purely from tactics to strategy and analysis. 1960s, this was the rise of the 4 Ps. Okay, you've covered this already in previous modules, units, so I'm not going to go over this again. This is when we started looking at, marketing myopia, needing to know about that external market, broadening that concept of marketing. Okay, so again, much like the 50s, moving away from that straight product orientation to actually there's more to it than just tactics. The 70s, there was a lot of unrest. If you look at the history at the time, there's a lot more competition within the market. Globalization is starting to take place, so we're starting to get competition from all over the world. And as such, the market started opening up as well. So instead of just having your home market, now businesses started feeling that, right, we need to start segmenting the market. It's so broad, we cannot serve everyone. And in serving everyone, we serve no one. So actually, we need to start doing segmentation. Identify the market segment that we want to appeal to, target that segment alone, and position our offering within that market. Okay, so going from mass broad spectrum appeal to actually starting to look at niche marketing, almost at the expense of the mass appeal. And there's a lot of debate going on now. Actually, was that right? Does STP work? Is segmentation, targeting, positioning important, or actually do you need to have both? If you look at Mark Ritson's recent work on marketing bothism, you can see that he makes the claim that actually it's not just about mass media, it's not just about digital and niche marketing and tactics, It's about both. And actually, how you need to target the mass market in your brand building activities, the wider scope of the business and what you do, and then target and segment, target and position key segments within that to get your growth. But the only way you're going to get growth is by also going after the mass. Okay, so there we also start seeing the rise of services marketing. This is as we move away from that 4Ps marketing mix and realizing that products aren't just products. People want more than just that value in that exchange. I give you money, you give me a product, we're all happy. The reality is, in the 70s, people started wanting more. They wanted more from the organizations. They wanted more in terms of ongoing service, warranties, more confidence that their product's going to last. And actually, if something goes wrong, what are you going to do about it? This comes in line with things like the Consumer Rights Act. And as markets start to mature and all the legal frameworks that underpin markets, so does marketing start to adapt to it. And the consumer becomes more informed. And actually, with the amount of competition within the markets, so too do businesses need to up their game to start looking at that differentiation. On we come to the roaring 80s. Okay, this is where we start to get marketing warfare. Global marketing really does start picking up. It's in its peak. It's, we're looking at global marketing, local marketing, mega marketing, direct marketing. We start getting more specializations within the broad church that is marketing. Internal marketing, as businesses start to grow, they realize that actually, how do we facilitate change within the organization itself? How does organization make that change, communicate that change, and bring people on that journey of the change that is taking place? That's where internal marketing starts coming along. 90s was a big bang in, obviously, digital started rising, early internet starts coming into the mainstream. We got to the .com eras. And as such, marketing moves again on from just product and service to emotional marketing, experiential marketing. Internet and e-commerce starts really picking up, and sponsorship marketing starts taking the fall. As people are able to interact with their celebrities, they start to look at how that celebrity and sports teams, again, this comes back to that segmentation, targeting, and positioning. You start realizing that actually, if you want to target a certain segment that follows a certain sports team, Formula One team, sponsoring their team enables brand rub-off. So you get those partnership marketing starts coming into play. And we will talk about that later on. 90s are starting to look at where the marketing ethics comes from. Gone are the days of the madmen in the 50s and 60s where you could just tell blatant lies to sell a product. Now marketing has to look at itself and start looking at, actually, are we a force for good? Is what we're doing ethical? Is what we're doing right? Are we going about it in the right way to minimize harm? Okay. Again, we'll go over that in later points. Finally, in the 2000s, and this is where we are now, it's financially driven. Performance marketing is king. This is where you start getting, if you read the long and the short of it, really excellent paper. I absolutely recommend you read it, long and the short of it. This is where you start looking at businesses wanting a return on investment. Marketing goes from beyond being a cost center. You need to be able to tell the business how it's working. What did we get for it? The move to digital, we can now track every click, interaction, mention, brand salience. You can check how many mentions we've had, how people feel about the brand easily, quickly, touch of a button. But the challenge with that is that then people are only targeting what can be measured. And actually that comes at a cost to that long-term brand building, that mass market. As we go down that niche marketing and marketing to very, very select groups of individuals. Another great book is The Long Tail by Chris Anderson. Really good book. And again, that really looks at that consumer tribes. Actually, with the invention of the internet, there's such a big market out there. The challenge is picking one. And actually, the theory is that there's actually so many markets that you could almost be boiling the ocean. And it's the same, that's business to consumer, and it can be the same for business to business. There could be so many markets for a product. Actually, the challenge is picking the one. Which market can we serve to the best of our ability that's financially viable for us to serve, but actually we can meet the expectations of them. And again, this is where the rise of co-creation. This is where the product, the customer and the business co-create the product. And again, it's the authenticity of marketing. And business to business has had a real challenge with authenticity in marketing, because people sometimes feel that one organization talking to another organization needs to be brand and lifeless. You know, we need to sound like an organization. Actually, what happens to the brand? What's the tone? How do we communicate? How can we create the authenticity rather than just us talking about us? Actually, how can we create that connection? Because remember, businesses, whilst we may be one business dealing with another business, the reality is there's humans in the middle of that. Okay, and we're going to discuss that in the time to come. So hopefully that's given you a real snapshot of how marketing has evolved over the time, and also set a bit of context in place as to why we're looking at certain weeks within the module and some of the content that we're looking at. Okay, thank you.